Hey everyone, it's Brennan at BC Labs, and today's video is for those who are doing some last-minute shopping and considering VR for gifts this year. Since we are kind of winding down the gift-giving season, I figured I'd go and do a quick rundown of some of the considerations if you're considering VR as a gift. So the first thing I want to get into is the age range considerations for VR and MR headsets. If you're shopping for kids, I would kind of divide it up into a couple different sections. If the person you're gifting for is already an adult or is an older teen, I'd say it's a great experience. I don't really see any age-related concerns. For 13 to 17 years old, you'll be happy to know that there are some parental control options that Meta offers right through your iPhone or Android app that pairs with the headset, so that's really good. At that point, there's really no concerns of eye strain from any of the studies that I've read. Most kids over the age of 13 or 13 and older, their eyes are already quite developed, and there's really not any concern, even as long as you're doing things in moderation. No different than playing video games on the couch or anything like that. Between having the option for parental controls, less impact of eye strain, the only other point is, can you actually have an account? And you can. Meta's new guidelines allow anyone 10 and older to have an account of some kind, and some of them have different levels of restrictions. So for 13 years and older, you can create your own account, but you have the option of tying it to parental accounts that can help monitor. So I think it's a great gift on that front. But once you get 0 to 13 years old, it's a little different. Although Meta has created a new policy to allow under 13-year-olds, starting at age 10, to have an account that is purely a child account and is intrinsically tied to a parental account, there are some concerns about eye strain. I've poked around and I found a couple studies, and they generally point to under the age of 13 as a possible stressor for the eyes because you're not changing your focus distance when you're wearing a headset like you would if you're looking around a room. And so it's kind of up to the parental discretion at that point. I would make sure that it's going to be used by some other people in the house to make it worth it, and also to help moderate that person's usage, because you don't want them to be overusing it. Parental controls are still in effect, and they're even stronger for 10 to 12-year-old accounts because they are actually intrinsically tied to the parental account. They can't be separated, so you have a lot of control there. For kids under the age of 10, so 0 to 9 years old, I would say it's too young. I wouldn't recommend it. Meta doesn't actually allow an account for this age range. And also, again, consider extremely limiting screen time just because developing eyes. And again, it's not necessarily that it's worse than watching TV or using a computer. It's specifically because the focal distance between your eyes and the lens is the same. So the eyes to the screen in the headset, it's the same distance, whether you're looking at an item that is far away in VR or up close, it's the same. So you don't get to exercise those eye muscles. So it's one of those things with moderation, maybe that can be overcome. I do want to point out that in terms of motion sickness, VR may be challenging to adjust to. So if a person gets really easily motion sick, you should take that into account. That doesn't necessarily make the decision outright because a lot of people are able to adjust pretty quickly. It's a matter of that you kind of have to expose yourself, you use a VR headset a little bit, and as soon as you feel a little you stop. After a few times of that, most people see marked improvement up to the point where maybe it just goes away, no sensitivity at all. Some people generally only can play sit-down games. It varies considerably. I personally can play almost any kind of VR experience and don't experience any motion sickness. So that's a consideration if you're buying a gift like this. I think that has covered most of the main concerns I wanted to address because most people are not super familiar with VR. And I wanted to make sure I kind of covered it so people feel confident in any sort of gifts. The headset options that are currently on the market kind of depend on which country you're in. So if you're in the United States like I am, you really only have a few options for standalone headsets. And most of those come from Meta. So Meta offers the Quest 2, the Quest 3, and the Quest Pro. There are ways to get a Pico headset used into the US, although I don't think they officially support it. There is a Vive XR, however, the games and the ecosystem around it aren't really what someone is probably thinking of when they're thinking of a VR gaming headset. Then you have options for PCVR. If the person you're gifting for already has a computer, you have things like the Valve Index, the Reverb G2, and a couple others. There's tons from there. But all of those get really expensive really quick. When we're talking about gifting to a kid or a young adult, most people are considering a Quest headset, a Quest 2 or 3, or potentially a used Pro. Now for me, unless you have a reason that you absolutely need eye tracking and face tracking, I would just skip out on the Quest Pro. It doesn't have good enough pass-through to compete with the Quest 3, and it has a worse processor, and it's a lot more expensive unless you get a good deal. So that really leaves the Quest 2 and the Quest 3. If you want a headset that you can buy brand new and is in support right now in the United States, and also supports the apps that one would expect. If you're in Europe and some other regions, you might be able to pick up a Pico. And I would say that, from my understanding, the Pico 4 is quite comparable to somewhere in between a Quest 2 and a Quest 3. I don't have one on hand, so it's hard for me to do a full-on review for that. And that's not really the intention of this video. So I kind of limited down the options to the two main ones now. So for US customers, the Quest 2 and the Quest 3 really do cover two different sections of the market. The Quest 2 is available brand new for $250 to $350, which isn't too bad, but it is the price of a console. That is the price of a Xbox Series S. And it's also available used in the $100 to $200 range if you're shopping on Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp or similar. Storage ranges go from 64 gigabytes up to 256 gigabytes. I personally say 64 gigabyte is too small. I would shy away from it unless it's priced really well, like really competitively. Otherwise, I would spring for the 128 or the 256 gig. Those are the only two that are actually still on sale new, but if you're a roaming marketplace, you might run into a 64 gig. As for mixed reality, which is something that you might have seen recently with some of my videos or some advertisement, that is something that on the Quest 2 is just not in the same realm as the Quest 3. It's all in black and white cameras provided by the IR cameras on the headset. There's no color pass-through. It's low quality, and the view is pretty warped. It's basically stitching four cameras together. So the Quest 2 really is a lower budget option that is strictly for VR standalone, where it's all on the headset, or PCVR, which is where you stream from a PC. It doesn't really offer much by way of mixed reality experience. Now let's get over to the Quest 3. So this is what I have now. I upgraded my Quest 2 to a Quest 3. But the price range is a bit high. You're looking at brand new, it's going to be $500 to $650 in the US. The $500 version is a 128 gigabyte, which I would say is generally enough for most people. If the person you're gifting for has good internet, it's really no big deal to delete old games and install new ones, and vice versa. Now, for the $650, you get a 512 gigabyte Quest. Personally, that's tons of space. I bought it because I do a lot of video recording, and I thought I would run out of space pretty easily. In all honesty, when you do the math, you're paying a lot of money, about $150 more, just to get 384 gigabytes. That's a pretty raw deal, honestly, with NVMe storage being so affordable now. Now, something that is important to mention between the Quest 2 and the Quest 3, the Quest 2 uses Fresnel lenses, which are an older technology and has a more limited area that it's really crystal clear when you're looking through it, while the Quest 3 uses pancake lenses, so almost the entire lens looks really good. So you can look around with your eyes without having to turn your head to get a better experience on the Quest 3 side. There's also a little bit higher resolution on the Quest 3. The FOV is better, though, which is how wide you can see, so it doesn't feel like you're wearing binoculars as much, while the Quest 2 has a little bit more of that feel. So that's the main differences in technology between them, except for the Quest 3 does have a more powerful processor and does have that pass-through mixed reality experience with full color, although it is a little bit grainy. So that's really the big differences between them, and if those aren't a big enough selling point, that's where you have to kind of decide which model you think is worth it. Now, before moving on to games, I'd like to quickly mention a few items that are important for all the MetaQuest headsets. So most of them offer a $30 referral code credit. So if you refer somebody or are referred before you activate a headset, both the referrer and the referee get $30 of credit to the store. So I usually recommend either using Metadog, or you can use my link if you don't already have a headset. They'll be in the description for both. Now, another cool thing to note is that there is a 25% game referral code option. So if you own a game, or you know someone who already owns a game, they can send you the code, or you can find the code, and you get 25% off a game. Now, at the same time, the person who referred you actually gets $5 meta credit also. So it's a real good way of sharing games with your friends. Both can end up with a copy for fairly cheap. It's really cool. There's also the option for refunds and returns. So all games generally apply a 2-week or 2-hour, whichever comes first, return window. So if you play for 2.5 hours in the first day, or you don't play it at all, but you wait 2.5 weeks after you bought it, you're likely out of luck. But you can always submit a refund as long as it's showing it as an option in the store. It just likely will get denied out of these windows. So the last major thing I'd like to take note of is game sharing. So I think it's really cool that you have this option. So if you have more than one headset, whether it's a very close family member or a child or however, you can actually make the same account the main account on both headsets and set the second headset to game share with other accounts on the device. So then the other person can log in with their personal account, and all the games are shared that's supported. So I think this is a really cool feature, and if you're familiar with Steam family sharing, it's very similar. So I just wanted to mention that because that can make a big difference between getting one game or versus getting 2 or 3 games. I also want to be clear, if you are trying to get games, you're going to want to get a meta gift credit. Now I'd like to go over a few of the games that I think are noteworthy. For kids under or 15 years old, I'd recommend Roblox. That, of course, you're probably familiar. It did come to the MetaQuest headset. Although I personally, it's not my style. I know a lot of kids really enjoy it, and it's cool that they've brought that over. There's also games like Knock, which if you've ever heard of Rocket League is very similar, but instead you're using a bow instead of a car to knock into the goal. But it's basically soccer with crazy physics. Then there's Walkabout Mini Golf, which is one of the best mini golf experiences on the Quest, and it's very multiplayer friendly. Even if you only have one headset in the house, you can pass and play and take turns and keep track of your own score, so that's great. Then there's things like 11 table tennis, there's bowling games, so there's a lot of sport options, as well as things like Dungeons of Eternity, which are RPG-style games, but they don't have much by way of gore. You're fighting skeletons and zombies, so you don't have to worry about graphic content. So I think that's okay for kids 15 and under at parent discretion. Now for kids 15 and over, of course those games are all included. They're fun regardless. But you have things like Contractors, Blade and Sorcery, Assassin's Creed Nexus. There's tons of games out there. There's things like Population 1 if you're looking for a FPS. There's a lot of options on the Quest that I think are great. This is a few for you to check out. Anyway, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. Feel free to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.